All right, today we are going to be creating a Cristo Ray Croc charm in Onshape. The reason that we want to do this is that we need a 3D model to be able to 3D print. And Onshape is a 3D modeling software that we can use on any computer that we have as long as we have internet connection. So let's start by going to onshape.com. And if you already have an account, you can just sign in. If you have not created an account, then we need to create an account for education. If you are a student or an educator, Onshape is free to use. If you are a business and you're using this to make money, then you gotta pay. So we'll go ahead and choose for students, and then you'll need to fill in all this information. You'll get an email, you'll have to confirm that, and then you will be able to sign in. So you can pause the video, get that done if you haven't already done so, and then you can play it once you're ready. So you will not see all of these documents. I've had this Onshape account for a couple years now, so there's several projects in here that I've created and have been shared with me. But what you should see in this top left corner here is a create button, and that create button will allow you to create a new document. So we're going to create that new document, and this will be our CRPHS Croc charm. All right, so we've created this new workspace, and you can see that we have a three-dimensional workspace, and the default planes that are given to you are the top, the front, and the right. So all a plane is it's a surface. So we have a top surface in 3 dimensions, right? We have 1 top surface, 2 front surface, and 3 right surface. Another way that we can think of like the top, the front, and the right. So you have like in math, you've seen like the x and the y axis. So the z axis in the 3rd dimension is actually coming like up out at you. Okay, so that's the workspace that we're building in, and we'll be able to build 3-dimensional objects in here because, well, it's a 3-dimensional workspace. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to create a sketch of the back of the Croc charm, and not actually the back, but really it's just going to be like this kind of the solid square part of this Croc charm that we're going to be doing. So to do that, we'll start, if we're going to be drawing on this top plane, starting a sketch on the top plane, we don't want the front or the right planes to get in our way. So we can actually hide those by clicking these eyes right here. So this now, top plane, should be the only thing that we see. And then we'll create a new sketch by clicking on the sketch button. And then it's going to ask you to select a sketch plane. So you can't do anything unless you choose a sketch plane. So a sketch plane is just the surface that you want to draw on. So in this case, we are trying to draw on the top plane. So we can click on anywhere in this gray region. And you see now the sketch plane for this first sketch that we created is on the top plane. All right, so for our Croc charm, we don't want it to be too big. We want it to be, relatively small. So if we're thinking about how big, we can either think of measurements in terms of like inches. You've probably heard of that before. But we can also use the metric system. If we're thinking about the metric system, we would have centimeters and millimeters. So for every 1 centimeter, there are 10 millimeters. Millimeters are like the smallest kind of like visual thing that you could see with like the naked eye without having to use like a telescope. So 1 millimeter is very, 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 very thin. If we're thinking about like the, let's see, what's a good 1 millimeter thick? So your fingernail is probably about a 1/2 millimeter. So if you doubled your fingernail, that would be 1 millimeter. So very, very, very tiny. We can go down to those measurements in Onshape, but to do that, we need to change the workspace units that we're using. So if you go to workspace units, if yours is in inches or anything other than millimeters, we want to be working in millimeters, so make that shift there. Okay, so now that we've got our units corrected and we've got our sketch created, you can see that because we went and we changed something out, we're no longer able to edit the sketch. That's not a problem at all. If we just double click on sketch 1, that'll open that up for us, and then we can go back to our sketching. So the next thing we need to do is create that square background. So getting back to that, we can think, for a Croc charm, usually they're not much bigger than, maybe 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters at the most. And so if we're translating that to millimeters, that would be 30 millimeters by 30 millimeters. So we're going to create a square that's that size, and we're going to center that square in the middle. So up here in your sketch menu, we can choose the center point rectangle. And if we go to the center and we click, we don't necessarily need to set this size exactly. It's going to be really tough to do. But what we can do is we can set the dimensions or the lengths of these different lines using this dimension tool up here. Now the shortcut for that is the D key, but you can also click it. So you can either click or you can press D. I like using the shortcut. It's a lot easier. So we'll dimension this to be 30 millimeters. And then another cool tool that we can use in Onshape, or several of these cool tools, these are called constraints. And you're going to learn a lot more about these. They can get annoying sometimes, but they really help us keep nice symmetric shapes and keep things in line. It makes our designs a lot cleaner. And one of the constraints that we can have is the equal constraint. And what that will do is it'll make any line segments equal to each other. So if we choose that and we click on this one side and the side that we dimensioned, it'll make it the side that we dimensioned. So this is 30 millimeters and this is 30 millimeters. So we have a 30 millimeter by 30 millimeter square. Okay, so now that we've got that base of the Croc charm, what we're going to do next is we're actually going to extrude this out. So we're going to turn this one sketch that was two-dimensional into a three-dimensional little piece. So we'll click on this surface that we created and make sure that it's all highlighted there. And then you can go up here and you can click on this extrude button. And what an extrude does is it takes any sketch and it brings it straight out into the third dimension. So you can see that it took our little square and it made a cube. Now we don't want this to be too thick because then it would look weird, coming off your Croc. So we'll make the depth of this 2 millimeters. Oops, 2 millimeters. And you can see that it made it nice and thin. Now notice that there's some different options here in later projects, and actually in this project yourself, you'll see where we're going to be doing some adding and some removing. But we'll get to that later on here in future projects as well. So we can confirm that, and you should have, make sure that your computer is charged. All right, you should have this square now. And what we're going to do next is we're going to actually get the Cristo Rey logo on this square. So we're going to be building off of the background that we created. So in order to do that, there's a couple things. I am not an artist by any means, and so instead of actually trying to draw the Cristo Rey logo by hand, I'm going to go ahead and trace it, and then that's the easier thing to do. So we need to find a good image that we can upload into here, and then we'll create a sketch on top of that, trace it, and then we can extrude it out of this background. So if we go to Google and we search Cristo Rey Philadelphia logo, we want to find one that just has the logo by itself without the words. This looks like a good one. So we want to save this, save image as, we'll name it the logo, just logo, save that, go back to Onshape here, and we will import the image into Onshape. So you got to find that CRPHS logo and open that up. Now it might take a minute to upload, so give it a second. Won't show up right away. The upload is in progress, and when it's finished, you should see the image in a different tab. And it looks like it's still not uploaded all the way. But if we give it another 30 seconds or so, it'll be in here, and we'll be able to use it. So in the meantime, what we'll do is we're going to create a sketch on top of this extruded part, and that's where we're going to put the picture, and then we'll create another sketch on top of that, and we'll then actually do the tracing of our logo. So we'll start with sketch, and we're going to choose this surface that we extruded. So it's the face of the extrude. And then in this sketch, we want to put the CRPHS logo, which has now been imported. So what we'll do is we will click on the second arrow here and insert image. And then we should see our logo here. And then we can click and drag this. We're going to end up making it a different size. So it'll take a second to show up. But if you want, you can go from the bottom left corner to the bottom right. And actually, that looks pretty good. If you go from the bottom left to the, top left to the bottom right, that will be perfect to trace. So that is awesome. Yeah, so we got that in there. So we're going to go ahead and confirm this sketch. And now you're going to see one of the nice things about the layers feature of Onshape. So this sketch is eventually going to get deleted. So we don't want to do anything on top of that, because anything on top of something that's deleted gets deleted with it. So what we can do right now is we can hide that sketch just for a second while we create. So if you click the hide button, it's being a little slow right now, so if that happens to you, don't worry. But it will get hidden. So now it's hidden, and we can see that surface that we created again. And that's really where we want this Cristo Ray sketch on. So what we'll do is we'll choose a sketch, and we'll do a new plane here. And just so we don't get confused, we want to make sure that we rename this something that, we're going to understand. So this is our trace, and this is where we're going to be doing the actual tracing. Okay, so then now that we have this trace created, we want to be in the trace, so we want to have this trace sketch open here, but we want to be able to show the image itself so that we can trace it. So we can turn the eye back on while we're in the trace sketch, and then we'll have the things that we need to trace. So you can see that our logo is very geometric. We have lots of squares, circles, triangles, and straight lines. So this should be a pretty easy one to trace, and you'll get to see some of the different sketch tools along the way. So in order to do the outside square and this inside square, we are going to use the corner rectangle tool. And we're going to start in the top left and drag down to the bottom right. Another way you can do it is just click once, and then you don't even have to hold. But then once you're ready to finish it, click again. That's another way to do it. And then the other part of this kind of square part of the logo is the arc that goes across here. So we have some different arc tools. We're going to use the 3-point arc tool, which is pretty simple. All you do have to do is click on the starting point, click on the end point, and then it will give you a radius, and you just have to fit that up with however big the arc you're trying to make is. And you'll do the same thing for the top part. Notice that when you flip it over, it'll just move that radius around. And it looks like I kind of messed this one up a little bit. That's not a problem. To get out of my tools, I press Escape on the keyboard, and then I can move that relatively easily. So no problem there. And then the only thing that we need to do before we actually copy, paste this, and then rotate it to our other parts is we need to trim out these lines that shouldn't be there. So this line and this line. And to do that, we can use the trim tool. So you just click on the lines that you want to cut out, and you're good to go. So we can press Escape to get out of our tools. And then we want to actually copy and paste this and rotate it around and translate it to fit these other squares, because we know that they're exactly the same. So just like you're doing maybe in a Word document, to copy and paste, all you have to do is click and highlight. Whoops. Click and highlight. Make sure that you have all of the lines selected, so it looks like we're good. Control C is to copy, and then Control V on your keyboard is to paste. So Control C on the keyboard is copy, Control V is paste, and then we need to rotate this to make sure that it fits in this bottom left corner. So in order to do that, if we rotate this thing 90 degrees counterclockwise, that'll be in the right angle. And then if we click on our square, we can translate this thing and we can move it to the position that we want, which is right here. And then to confirm it, all we have to do is just click with the left click one time outside, and it'll jump right to it. So we will paste one more time, a Control V to paste. This time we need to go 180 degrees, so we'll click on the rotation piece. We'll rotate 180 degrees. And then again, we'll click on the square to translate this to the exact position that we need. Once we've finished, we click outside one time, and we'll see that it jumps into place. Okay, so now that you have your square part of the logo, the last thing we need to do is the triangle and the crown. So we're going to use some straight lines to do this, and you're going to see some of these auto constraints pop up. That's actually a good thing in this case, because what we want is we want this triangle to start at the same height and the same kind of vertical length as our squares. So you can see those lines pop up automatically. If we click, it'll lock that in place. And then we can make sure that it's horizontal, parallel with that line there. We can make this line up again just by hovering over, and we can finish by clicking right there. Last part is the crown. Make sure that we're starting horizontal with our triangle there. We'll go out. And we'll finish off the crown. When you're zooming in and out, you actually when you zoom in and out with your mouse, you actually are zooming in and out from where the cursor is. So you can notice as I'm zooming in, it's going right to where the cursor is. And then if I zoom out, it actually zooms out away from the cursor. So if I wanted to be able to see over here, what I would do is I would zoom out from over here. I can see that more. If I want to be able to see over here, then I'd zoom out from over here. And zooming in, I just go zoom in on my cursor. Okay, so that was a little side tangent. Let's finish off this crown. All right, so we've got all those lines, and if you notice, they're all there. They're all in blue because we haven't dimensioned them at all. We'll get into that in future demos, but for now, we have these all drawn, so we can confirm this trace. Then we can actually delete the image itself because we no longer need the image, we have it traced. So if you just click on the thing in the menu and press delete, my internet's slow right now, but there we go. Now you can see that we just have our traced outlines, and when we hover over them, we can see we have all the areas that we're going to eventually want to be our logo. So we'll do an extrude for this trace. So we'll click on trace here, and we'll extrude this. So you can see that now the logo is coming out. So we'll do this another 2 millimeters for the depth. And if you confirm that, you can see that we have this little, now the start of a croc charm. Okay, cool. So then the last thing we need to do is we need to put the hole in the back in order to attach the part that goes into the croc. So we'll go to the bottom plane this time, and again create a sketch on this bottom plane. And then what we can do is we can create a center point circle so that we know it's right in the center. And this needs to be 10.5 millimeters in diameter. So if we dimension, or we click D on the keyboard, make this 10.5, enter, confirm that, and then the last thing we'll have to do is we'll have to extrude this, but instead of it making it come out, because we don't want that, we want it to go in. So when we do a extrude here, we're actually going to turn it into a remove, and it needs to be removed 1 millimeter. So if we look in here, you can see that it's actually cutting in, and if you confirm it, you can see that that's exactly what happens. So there you have it. There is your Cristo Rey Croc Charm. We can take this and export this to the printer by just going to the part here, right-clicking, and exporting. And this STL file, so if we rename it CRPHS Croc charm. We'll be able to download this and then use a slicing software on the computer, which is called FlashForge. And this is what will actually be what creates the file that is then sent to the 3D printer. So we can slice this into different layers so that the computer has instructions on how it's going to lay this down, or the printer has instructions for how to lay it down. And if we see, we can start on the very bottom layer, you can see how it's going to build up to finish the Croc charm. So you'll learn about 3D printing when you come in, and then you'll actually be doing this in the actual lab. And then after that, you'll be able to create any of your own Croc charms that you want. So hopefully this went well. If you need some more help, come and see me. We'll see you next time. Grace.